Hey everybody, I'm Jean Chatzky. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. Very excited to have all of you along with me today. Title of our program, as you can see, is The Future is Female. And we're going to talk about that specifically as it relates to retirement. Women, as we all know, have different retirement challenges than men do. We live longer. We still have a substantial gender wage gap that leads to lower balances in our retirement accounts when it's finally time for us to stop working. Add to that the fact that we are still the ones in most cases, and this was definitely amplified during the pandemic, we're still the ones who take breaks more often from the workforce to care for kids, to care for our older parents. And then we go on to live about 5 years longer than the men in our lives, which means that we have to handle these challenges ourselves. Fortunately, there are a lot of new technological innovations coming down the pike to help us. They are changing the landscape dramatically when it comes to how we will live and how we will connect and communicate during our older years. Joe Coughlin sits right in the middle of all of this technology and all of this research. He's the director of the MIT Age Lab, the Age Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He also teaches in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning and the Sloan School's Advanced Management Program. He's been on this program before, and we've asked him back again because he is very wise when it comes to thinking about how we're going to do things, not just today, but how we will do them better in the future, and how we need to adapt our own behavior and our own thinking in order to make life in the future not just affordable, but really possible and easier on all of us. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming back.
Hey, Gene, thank you so much for having me. And by the way, great introduction. I'm going to play that recording about being wise to my daughters and see if they actually believe it now.
Exactly. I think you should just tee that up on a 30-second loop and let it run while they're sleeping, and
There you go.
they'll definitely take it in. Let me just tell the people who are watching us, this is an interactive conversation. At least that's how Joe and I like to think of it. If you've got questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If you've got comments, please put them in the chat. I'll weave them into the conversation. We want to understand what you're thinking and what you're concerned about as well. So, Jill, let me start with where we are right now, which is um, at a very difficult time for our economy, for our pocketbooks. Inflation is higher than it's been in 40 years. Within the half hour, the Federal Reserve will announce its latest moves on interest rates. We've got markets that have been incredibly volatile, people who have retired during the pandemic who now wish that they could undo those moves. From where you sit, what are the most important touch points in the landscape right now when it comes to retirement, and specifically when it comes to retirement for women?
I think, great question. I think that the pandemic, as well as inflation and the many other things that are surrounding us right now, have really put a fine point on, shall we say, the necessities or the priorities in life. Effectively, what really matters, our families, our personal health, wherever we choose to call home, and frankly, where work fits in our lives as well. And women play a particular role. As I write in my book, The Longevity Economy, yes, the future is female, largely because, and I'm sure everybody's going to chuckle when they see a bald guy in a bow tie saying this, but frankly, women do it all. Women are facing this far more difficult time than, frankly, even men. Why? They're the chief consumer officer of the house. They make 90 cents on the dollar of every decision of healthcare. They're the ones that were providing care or worried about providing care during the pandemic and continue to do so. That inflation's eating away what little savings most of us were able to accumulate. And so I think the challenge we've got right now is that in the past 2 or 3 years, the future is looking even more uncertain, that we want a little bit of stability. So it's not just about the price of bacon and the price of gas. It's just that so much has come at us in the last 3 years. If you're managing a household, and primarily, I'm not saying it's correct, primarily that's women, you've got a lot on your shoulders.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And when we started talking about having this conversation, you brought a concept that I'd never really heard of to the fore, and that's the idea of household resilience. That it's not enough really to plan for the financial aspect of retirement, but you have to plan for all of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of retirement. How is it going to look? How is it going to happen? How am I going to get from step A to step B? When did this idea of household resilience become something that you started to talk about?
Yeah, the notion of household resilience is something that particularly women know well. Getting the job done, whatever the job might be, securing what doctor I'm going to have, ensuring that I've got transportation, that I know where everybody that I'm caring for is going to be. And Gene, what I'm really pushing for in household resilience is the difference between what we used to call or still call retirement planning versus retirement preparedness. And resilience is the following, and I think a lot of us can appreciate this. And I love to do the cooking in the house and whatnot. You can have a plan. You can have a retirement plan. And you can have a shopping list. That's a plan. But until that food is in your cart, in your cabinet, or frankly, in your frying pan, you're not eating. And so preparedness is actually having the services identified. Who are you going to have come into your mom's house to change her light bulbs when you're not there to be able to do so? Who are you going to have for that healthcare provision that you may need someday when you're living solo? And so resilience is not just the money, it's not just the plan, but really thinking out who's going to do the work. And this is particularly a female issue because, as I mentioned, she's been doing the work. And sadly, folks, generally speaking, even younger men who claim they're doing more, the women are still doing much more.
And the landscape has really changed. I mean, one of the factoids that you brought to light yesterday was about the age at which people are going into assisted living, if they're going into assisted living, and the fact that they're not staying as long as they once were. And what I took from that is that, in fact, people are staying home. Technology is helping us with that, but that we need to think about setting ourselves up for our late 70s, early 80s, into our 90s in a very different way than we used to. Can you sort of talk us through what the world looks like compared to what the generation before us faced?
Absolutely. There's some real differences with our parents and our grandparents, if you will. First off, generally speaking, they did not live as long. So if you're particularly a younger baby boomer, Gen X, and certainly millennial and thereabouts, you've got better than a 50% shot at making it past 85. And for those who make it past 65, an even better shot at making it well into your 90s. So you're going to be living longer. You're going to have more time on planet, so to speak. But there's something else. All of us, we had fewer kids. That natural social security, not the check, but the people who care for you, isn't there. Or if it's not there, we had fewer children or no children at all. And since the primary caregiver after a spouse typically is the oldest adult daughter, she's busy. She may have moved away. She may have kids of her own. And being able to provide that care that we may have provided our parents is not there. So the new resilience, or what I like to call longevity planning or preparedness, is you're going to start thinking about, okay, most of us still say we want to age in place. That's gerontological geek speak for I want to stay in the house I'm living in my 50s for a longer
Yeah.
period. Effectively, Gene, your marriage, your mortgage, your memories are here. You want to stick around, but how do you do that? How are we going to be able to finance the person that's going to come in to do the maintenance that you once did by yourself? How are you going to facilitate the transportation you may need? 70% of us over 50 still live in suburban areas where public transportation either doesn't exist or it's not a real feasible option. And so what we're starting to see now is that women, particularly because they're going to be living solo at some part in their career or their lives rather, are going to need to start thinking about the services, the financing, and the trusted providers they're going to need to live longer, better, independently.
I gotta say, it's something that we're dealing with day to day, right? I'm fortunate that we have a house on the shore at like many shore houses because of weather. It's constructed upside down. It's got a kitchen on the top floor and bedrooms on the floor below. And we actually had an architect in there just this weekend talking about should we be adding an elevator, right? It's I can get up the stairs, but it's getting tougher for my mother, and it's vertical. And this is not something that I think the generation that owned this house before me would have necessarily considered, but it's a lot cheaper than moving.
Yeah, in fact, elevators in new homes, now I grant you that's at a different income spectrum than most of us, but elevators in new homes are becoming a thing. And even if you can't afford it now, often what some architects are doing is building closets on the first floor and a closet above it on the second floor so that could become an elevator shaft at some point. No,
It
longevity changes everything.
Yeah, we've got some questions coming in, and I want to turn to them, and then I'll continue. Um, John says, as I will most likely pass away first, John being the man, any recommendations for how to set up my wife to be taken care of?
Well, I think that, a responsibility of a husband, if I dare say, is to have that conversation about should you pass first? What does she want? What are her preferences? And how do you balance that with what you can afford? But together, because it'll be a lot easier to do it together, shop for who are those trusted people that you're going to feel good to have knock on your wife's door and come into the home when she's there by herself and perhaps frailer than she is today. Who is that trusted provider? Can you afford it? And start making a list of all the things you did around the house and how you're going to replace that.
Yeah, yeah, really good advice. And Karima would like to know about a short-term plan and a long-term plan, right? A lot of these things that we're talking about may actually not happen for decades, but putting them in place, or at least putting a roadmap in place so that you have the steps to check off in order to get there, seems to me to be at the heart of what you're talking about when you're talking about household resilience.
In many ways, the younger generations may be better prepared than the rest of us. And here's the reason why I say that is that they are using technology and on demand services, or I like to say life by app, as a matter of convenience. For some of us that are late stage baby boomers, we often say a matter of laziness, if you will, rather than convenience. But guess what? Anything that makes your life today easier, more convenient, and on demand, guess what? That technology, that service you've already vetted because you thought it was either cool or convenient, provides you care in later life. No, Gene, one of the things that most people don't think about it, when we think of assistive technology, we often think of wheelchairs or things like that. The microwave is actually a piece of assistive technology. It's convenient when you're young or when you're trying to get the kids together and make a meal and whatever. But when you're older and you're living by yourself, a pre-made meal that you can pop in the oven in 30 seconds, you've got something to eat. That's actually something that you bought early in your life for another reason, but cares for you much later. That's how we should start thinking about our investments.
How about an Apple Watch, right? I mean, same thing, right? If you've got a watch and maybe you bought an Apple Watch at the or an iWatch or whatever we're supposed to call it these days. Maybe you bought it because you wanted to to track your steps, or maybe you wanted to listen to get your phone calls while you are out on the go without having to reach for your phone, or whatever. But it is one of those devices that helps you stay connected as an older person, that can connect you to the smart speakers in your house, that can help you get aid and assistance if you fall down.
Well, one of the things, and this was not product placement by design, but but in all fairness, the pandemic served as a propellant, pushing technology into the homes of almost everyone, but in particular into the homes of older adults even faster. And largely it was put there not necessarily by older adults, but by their adult children who needed that in there. And what we found was really cool. And we knew that at the Age Lab from doing research, but the pandemic was a natural experiment. Older adults are not afraid of technology. It's not that they don't trust technology. They want to know, what is it usable? Is it worth my time, my hassle, and frankly, my money? And boy, the pandemic showed that watch, that smart speaker, the ability to see my grandchildren online on a regular basis. Now that was purpose, and that means now it's worth it.
Can we talk about the role of the financial planner in this equation? I
Yep.
know that you recently gave a talk at a summit for Transamerica, and their CEO was one of the founding members of the Alliance for Lifetime Income. As you addressed this audience of financial professionals, where did you tell them that they fit in this changing paradigm?
I think financial professionals are on the edge of a whole new frontier, an entirely new business that will include what their core business is today: lifetime income, financial security. However, it's what we were talking about before, Gene. It's really about not financial planning or even that brief period of life, which is not that brief, it's one third of adulthood, retirement planning. It's longevity planning, that they are the coach, the navigator, the agenda builder, if you will, to say this old age thing, this longevity thing at any stage of your life is actually quite new. And we're going to help guide you through that. And it's all going to include money, but maybe I'm going to be the company or the advisor or the coach that can tie you together with the services you need, the trusted providers you might need, or to give you heads up that while you've never thought you might need senior housing, your mom's getting a little frail. Let me tell you a little bit about how you should think about senior housing. And by the way, how much it's going to cost. So, no, I think financial professionals are on the very edge of an entirely new business of advice that all of us are going to need to live longer, better.
What you're describing sounds an awful lot to me like concierge medicine. That it's you've got a primary physician, a PCP, right, primary care provider, who's your quarterback essentially, who is the one who is connecting you to the ENT when you need that, or connecting you to the gastroenterologist when that's what you happen to need. I mean, it sounds like a concierge type service. Is that where we're headed in the world of financial services?
I think that's where we're headed almost in everything. If you think about it today, all of us need a trusted advisor. And today, the most trusted advisor out there is other people like me. No, not bald headed geeks at MIT, other people like yourself going online. So, where we get that trusted advice now is a girlfriend, or what we see online, or the number of thumbs up, or stars. What we now need is someone who can be that trusted advisor to anticipate what may happen or to help us at the time of need. We have it in everything else. Why not longevity?
When it comes to long-term care insurance and paying for long-term care, as we look to a future where perhaps people do stay in their homes longer, are able to stay in their homes longer, we have technology to help us make that more possible. If we do end up needing a year or two in an assisted living facility, it will be a smaller period of time at an older age, very likely. How do we think about purchasing insurance or other solutions that can help us pay for what is likely to be that expense that hits us late in life?
Well, first off, we have to think about what long-term care is means today and how it's evolving. Quite often in the consumer's mind, they think of long-term care as that insurance that will provide senior housing support, whether it's assisted living or skilled nursing. Not incorrect, but woefully incomplete. What we're starting to see now is what people are requiring are home care in the house, being able to maintain the home, food service delivery, and the like. So, my lab here at MIT, we've been doing work with, for instance, Mass Mutual and other companies that are part of the Alliance for Lifetime Income. But we're rethinking, how does caregiving take place? What is the future of long term care to ensure that we have the financial stream, but also the provision of trusted service providers that are there when we need it, not simply a check, because just a check, you're almost there. But it's like my shopping list example. Just because you got a list for what you're going to have for dinner, until you have it in the house, you're not having dinner.
Well, and also, what bucket is that money going to eventually come out of, right? Because if you're thinking that a long-term care insurance policy is going to pay for your meals, I would say that's not the long-term care insurance policy of today.
Correct.
Maybe we will get there tomorrow, but what you're really talking about in that case is providing for an additional, a more steady stream of income that can keep you in your house and living the comfortable lifestyle that you are aspiring to. And as we talk on this show about the need for products that provide guaranteed income, like annuities, that's just another way to frame that. Craig writes, my wife and I are in good health and almost 70. Should we sit down with a funeral home planner now? We are both planning cremation. Interestingly, you I know have done some looking into how the funeral home industry and the pre-planning industry has changed.
Yeah. I think that as much planning and actually is, again, the difference between planning and preparing. Your intent, you've already planned it. Now let's get it done. I'm a big believer in that preparation. I'm not a big believer in having a set place where I've deposited my money saying it's going to be this provider alone. There are products out there where you can do your preparation and have that check and all the services that you've selected done anywhere it may be needed. You're 70 years old today. You're likely to live many more years ahead. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be living where you're living today. You may change where you might consider to be buried or the service provider you want. So you want flexibility because there's a lot of life still left at age 70.
That is so true. I write a column for AARP, and I answer questions from readers and help them with things. And one of the things that is going on a lot right now is people trying to sell burial plots that they purchased many years ago, because families have dispersed. As you mentioned, we've had fewer kids, people have moved, and cremation is on the rise like a rocket. And so there are a lot of changing needs in that industry in particular. Let me just mention again that we are happy to take your questions, happy to bring your comments into the conversation. If there's anything that you would like to add, you are absolutely welcome to participate. We know that we are, at least we've been believing for some time, that we're on the precipice of the biggest transfer of wealth in generations. That there is going to be, I believe it's about a $40 trillion transfer of wealth from the baby boomers and the generation older than them to their offspring. Who will benefit from this? Is it going to shake out the way that we have anticipated? And will it happen? I guess my underlying question there is are the parents going to need so much of that money that the assets actually won't transfer as expected?
Yeah, was it Mark Twain or someone who said history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme? And I think the rhyme is yes. I think many of us will hope to be able to pass down a check to our children, or at that point, adult children. I am one of the few people who is not getting overly excited about the size of that transfer of wealth. And I've heard 40 trillion, I've heard 30, I've even heard 60 trillion. The numbers get better in the telling. And Gene, to the way you frame the question, I think is where I'd like to go, is that I do believe that not only are the generations like my own in front of me and those certainly behind me going to be living longer, they're going to be needing more services to live well, to be able to stay in their home, or if they go into senior housing. It's not for the faint of heart and not for those that are not well financed. So I think a lot of that wealth is going to be, shall we say, cashed in as part of the longevity dividend of living longer. But also keep in mind, our parents and grandparents, they were really nice and patient. They didn't expect to live better in old age. They expected to live quietly and then check out and have something to give as an inheritance. I'm not so sure that my generation and those that follow me are as patient or as polite in terms of like not wanting to live longer, well, and travel and live in my house and do whatever it takes. So I think we're going to be spending a lot of that money down. The second point is the majority of that money is not cash asset. It is not even in equities. It's in their house. And here's the problem I see with that. Most of the people, the majority of people over 50 live in suburban areas in single family homes. The problem is the next generation of people where you are presumably going to sell that house in order to get the equity out or to send to give to your adult children. That house you bought because it had a good school district, 2 or 3, 4 bedrooms, and a big yard. The next generation is not showing any inclination to have one child, let alone many children. So the school district is less of a sell. I'm not sure I need more than 2 bedrooms, let alone 3. And frankly, a big yard? No, frankly, I got a very small dog. So I'm not sure who that housing stock is going to be sold to.
Do you have your feelings on that changed at all as we've come through the pandemic? I mean, I'm just, I am a focus group of one who does a lot of me search, right? So I lived in a suburban town where I bought a house in 2005 because I was getting a divorce at the height of the housing bubble and was convinced that I would never get my money out of that house. And then along comes the pandemic and everybody wants to live in my suburbs. And I actually made a little bit, which was a very, very nice surprise. But I have in the last few years with the millennials, maybe even accelerating their purchases of homes with the, thought that, oh my God, I need to get out of this apartment because I don't want to work in the same room with my spouse. I'm just wondering if that has changed at all, if the suburbs are not as dead as we thought.
Yeah, I'm going to steal your phrase, me search. I do a lot of that as well, if you will. No, I think that people are going to be craving for space. Absolutely. I think that old mill towns and the suburbs are getting a new breath of fresh air. And by the way, that was even happening before the pandemic. The pandemic just accelerated that. In many suburban towns, you're finding some of the restaurants and the activities that you would have found in center city or downtown, that now you can get it cheaper and easier to access in the suburbs. So the suburbs are far from dead. But what I'm suggesting is that while we want more space, the housing stock that's out there may not be the housing stock that the millennials and soon the Gen Zers want.
So if you were planning, as I'm sure you are, for your own next 20 years, how are you and your wife setting yourselves up so that you are resilient? How are you looking at the decisions that you're making now in terms of where you're going to live, how you're going to live, how you're going to travel, how you're going to spend, so that you know that you'll be able to go the distance?
So a couple things, and that's a fun question you asked, because I'm right in that demographic, and largely that is the driver of home remodeling and modification overall of the home, which a market, by the way, which is driven primarily by women over the age of 47. And so my wife and I had a discussion. Do we want to downsize like some of our friends did years ago and move to the city or whatever it is? And our decision was no, we like where we are in the suburbs, but we want to modify the home, not to just get rid of that god awful avocado green from the 1980s, but we decided if we're going to modify the home, let's modify it so that we can stay, so that we make the kitchen more accessible, the bathrooms with wider doors or different toilets and the like. So planning not just to age in place, but planning to stay comfortably. We've started identifying service providers around us that, shall we say, that can be on speed dial to fix things around the house or to understand what our run rate's going to be able to operate different things in the house, whether it's home delivery of foods or plowing the driveway, which is a big deal outside of Boston, if you can imagine, in the winter. And so that preparation is about changing the house to suit a lifestyle that's not just today, making it fashionable for today, making it fun, but making it so it provides care later on. Finding
And
service providers as well.
what technology will you be adding?
Well, as you might imagine, I work here in a toy shop. I mean, Miss Daisy, a vehicle that you see
Oh, you
sitting
have to tell us about Miss Daisy behind you, because I'm sure people have been watching and thinking, okay, why is he in his
Yeah,
garage?
why is he sitting in a car dealership? No, that's Miss Daisy, as in driving Miss Daisy digitally at the Center for Transportation and Logistics at MIT. We use that to understand how people of all ages learn, use, and ultimately trust new technology. On that road to the autonomous vehicle, there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way. We're trying to understand how that'll be used. But in the home, one of my colleagues, Dr. Chai-Woo Lee, is working on the future of the home as being fully automated. So the idea of everything from smart speakers to communications to cameras on the door, but also imagine your refrigerator and the like is going to start to anticipate that you're already out of your Ben and Jerry's double fudge brownie. And before you find out at 10 o'clock at night when you need it, it's been delivered that day ahead of time to the door. And we're even seeing innovators like Walmart that are coming into your home and putting it in the fridge. We're seeing toilets that are getting smarter now that are, shall we say, and Gino, keep this clean for those that may be near that download from the user, if you will, their body weight, did they take their medication, their food nutrition needs, and then upload those data to a call center, to a doctor that can, and frankly, there's even one experiment going on in England where a grocery store is using those data to facilitate home delivery of the food your toilet is deemed missing from your diet. So I would
Wow.
buy technology today, but be aware it's going to change tomorrow.
Boy, just one step from researchers using the water flows from the septic system, right?
Yep.
To figure out how much of the pandemic was in your community.
Yep.
And now at this individual level, it's quite amazing, quite astonishing. Joe, if we want to learn more about your work, we want to learn more about all of these innovations as they come down the pike so that we can be early adopters ourselves. What's the best way to do this?
Well, especially if you're in the role of being a caregiver, which can begin with a phone call, hi, Dad, how are you? To things that are far more in depth. We have a program called Care Hive, and we are recruiting people from around the world to help us help you to understand all those things you do. So go to the Age Lab website, which is agelab.mit.edu. And we'd love to have you at Care Hive or any of our research, but also to learn about all the neat and cool things, because living life tomorrow, it's going to be better. In fact, it's going to be cool.
I'm very excited for that. Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the Alliance for making this happen. Take care.
Absolutely. And for all of you, if you're looking for additional information, as always, you can go to our website. It's protectedincome.org. And for specific information on this conversation, protected/Coughlin. Joe, thanks a bunch. See you soon.
Thanks so much.